All right, welcome back. We're in the home stretch here. So this week we're going to be taking a look at new features that we can add to our projects. So we have the ability to create pins. We have added our usernames. Our users have profile pages that allow them to see their own pins, as well as being able to view other people's pins. Looks like we're missing an image there, but looking pretty good. So let's go ahead, and what we're going to work on now is the ability to repost something. So right now I'm going to go ahead and log out of this account. So I'm logged in as Jabba the Hutt, and I'm going to log in as I have a BB8 user here. And right now I don't have any pins, so if I go to /BB8, no pins. So we want to change that. And right now, this is one of those things where there's a whole bunch of features that you can go in and add yourself. If we know that we don't have any pins here, you should probably display some kind of message, or maybe add the ability to add a new pin from this page. I'm going to leave all those features up to you. Those are all things that can be built upon from what we've covered so far. However, what I want to do is take a look at these pins that I did not post and be able to repost them. So what that'll look like is, for now, just a text link, but you can definitely have some fun with it. Design some kind of repinning button or repost button that allows your users to do that. In the next couple videos, we're going to be adding a few other features, mostly the ability to like something, so that you can have a like counter and the number of users and information on who liked what images. Which is kind of nice too if you want to be able to refer back to things that you've kind of saved in your account. And then the other one is going to be being able to organize pins by boards. And if you've used Pinterest, that's a really big feature there. So we'll take a look at that. But let's go ahead and think about what we need to do for reposting. So what's really interesting about this is that we're going to take a look at adding some methods to our model. And we haven't done this yet, but it's something that if we go ahead and pull up our application here, let me close this, just get us back to where we were. It's something that we've done almost every bit of logic inside of our controller. And here you can see our index, show, new, and so forth. What we want to be able to do is actually allow someone to repin something from an existing pin. And so what we can do is we can actually capture that inside of our model so that we have some kind of logic that's tied to our pin. Every time you have a pin, there is a way to call that method. So what we're going to end up with is, just like we have our validations and our attachments and our associations here, we're actually going to be able to define a method here. And right now I'll just go ahead and call it def repost. And what this is going to allow us to do, if we have a pin, let's just say it's the first one, you'll actually be able to do @pin.repost. And there's a few other things that we can think about there that we'll add in here. We'll eventually add some helper methods here. Let's say to check if this pin has been reposted. Let's see, rather it's not that the pin was reposted, but that the pin came from, was a repost from another pin. And then we might also have, what else might we have? We might have the ability to get the original post from the reposted pin. So those are going to be some of the things that we're going to add here. We'll do that in a little bit, but what we want to do is focus on this one here. And what we're going to end up doing for this is building out this method so that it's going to create a new post, a new pin. So we're in the pin class. It's going to take the pin that we're on and create a new pin with all of the details that it has, but we have to be able to set a new owner ID. And so let's just start off with the first thing, and I'm going to go ahead and just start a new variable. We'll call it repost pin, And we can easily say pin.new and get a brand new pin, which is fine. And then you would have to fill in every single detail of repost pin dot description equals self dot description. So when this gets called of pin dot repost, this is self. So this description is self dot description is going to get put into our new description. However, we don't need to do all of this, so we can just do self.dupe, and this will create a clone of our self object, which is this pin here. So assume that we have, pin dot first in there. So this pin will then get reposted. Self.dupe will duplicate it, and then if you wanted to override the description, you could do that, but we no longer need to do this. If we were to inspect what repost pin is, it's going to be an exact match to the original post, except that it won't have an ID because it hasn't been saved to the database. So it will have everything it needs except for an ID. And what we want to do here, like I was saying, is that if we just save this as is, we can just do reposts pin.save. This would duplicate the post and save it as the original owner. So this would actually make it so that if I was trying to repost someone else's pin, it would still be their pin. They would just have two of them. We don't want to do that. So what we can do is, let's go look at our schema here and look at pins. So we know which owner a pin has by looking at their user IDs. So we want to set a new user ID when we clone this. So we're going to do .user ID. And we normally would have access to current user, but we only have access to current user inside of our controller. So in our pins controller, we have an ID, and we want to be able to pass it into this method, and then we can assign it. So what we're going to do is actually give this a user up here, and you could name that however you'd like. So this user is going to have an ID on it. We don't yet have user. We're going to go ahead and do that in a moment. But what we've got here is repost pin.user_ID, and it's going to be equal to that new user ID. Now, if we were to save this and try to repost, we, one, don't have access to user. We don't have anything in our UI yet that allows us to repost. So we kind of are at a standstill there. But what I want to think about here is that when I create a new post, I want to be able to link back to the post that we posted from, so that we can give credit to the original poster. So what we're going to need to do is create some kind of either original pin ID or something like that. And we know what this is because self is the original pin. So we can do self.id, but we need to add this to our model. So we want to add this to pin. So what we're going to do for that, let's see, we've got an error here. What we're going to do is do Rails generate migration, add original pin ID to pins. And original pin ID is going to be an integer. We'll go ahead and enter. Once that runs, we should be able to go look in our migrations, and you'll see that there's an add column migration there, so that looks good. Let's do rake db migrate to actually make that change happen. So now we have the ability to support original pin ID, which looks great. There's one other thing that we're going to run into here, but we'll come back to it to address in a little bit, because it's something that if you don't do it, it's going to cause issues, and we'll look at why that is in a second. So what I want to do is go ahead and create a new custom route. So right now we have no way of calling this from our controller, and there's no way in our API for us to actually repost something. If we do rake routes in our application, you can see that we can create pins, delete pins, show pins, all these things, which is really great. But what if we could just add our own action to this list? That would be ideal. So what we're going to do is go to routes, and that's going to be under config. So here's config/routes. And you'll see here that we have resources for pins. So what I'm going to do here, and this video is a little bit out of date from what we've looked at before, but some of you will have resources comments in here, and it'll look just like this. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, and you'll see here's our route for our username. It's below our pins and comments. But then what we're also going to do is come in and create a new action. So you can ignore resources comments for right now. If you have that there, that's perfect. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is define a new route for pins. So we're inside of resources pins, and we've created this do block. That do block allows us to have nested routes. So in this case, this would be comments. We have another video that will show you how to do that so that you can comment on each individual pin. But what we want to do now is actually create a new member, and we're going to do another do block, and we've got an end. And we're going to basically say that we want to do a post to /repost, and that is going to map to pins, which is the controller, repost, which is our method. And if we do that and run rake routes, you'll now see that down here we should have a repost pin. So here is pin/id/repost, which is great. So if you get to pin/4, you can call pin/4/repost, but it has to be a post call for that to work. And so that will now create our route. Now we need to create this method here. So again, this means pins controller, and this is the action that we want to run, or the method that we want to run. So if we go into our pins controller, scroll down to wherever we want to put this, I'm going to put it at the end before our private, and we're going to do def reposts end. And what we need to do here is we need @pin, and @pin is not equal to anything at this point. We want to be able to do this @pin reposts, and then we remember, if we look back to pin, we pass in the user. So def repost user, and def reposts, this passes in the user here. So @pin.repost, and we know from devise that we can just pass in current user. So here's current user.pins, current user.pins. Current user is our currently logged in user. So @pin.repost current user. And what we're then going to be able to do from there is redirect to, and then I'm going to take them back to the pins path. So this will take you back to /pins. So if this all works, this should clone the post and redirect us. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be an issue with this, and that is that the image should not show up in the new pin. We will fix that in a second. But for right now, this should call pin.repost, which is inside of our pin model. So repost with the user, and then duplicate itself, set the ID to the new user, and then set the original pin ID to the ID of the original post, and save it. So that looks great, but we now need to actually make it so that we can call this. So let's go check out our views. And the only way to call this is that we need to somehow make it so that there's a repost button on our screen here. Let me restart the server here. That's right. So when we look at this @pin isn't equal to anything. So @pin equals pin.find, and then we need to use the parameters to find that pin, but we've already done that right here. So what we need to do is call setPin before reposts, and we're doing that way up here. So before action, setPin, and let's go ahead and add repost to that. Okay, so it looks like we've lost an image there as well, so that's interesting. What we're going to go ahead and do is create a link. So in our views, pins, index, here we have if the current user is equal to the pin user, we have edit and delete. What we want to be able to do is, if it's not, then we want to be able to let them repost. So what we're going to do here is create another div. And we want to link to and say repost. And if we go ahead and run rake rats here, we'll see that we have this pins/id/repost. It has a name of repost_pin. So we want to take them to repost pin path. And this one does require the ID of the pin. So we need to pass the pin inside of that path. So now we've got that. It looks pretty good. However, with repost, this is something that's kind of sensitive. So what I want to do is actually make them confirm. Are you sure? And this is something that you can look up in the documentation for how to do a confirmation on a link. It's a very handy little Rails helper there. Let's refresh and first start our server again. And we'll just open a new tab so we don't have to do that every time. And now you'll see that I don't have any of these posts, so I can repost all of them. So let's try reposting this AT-AT Rogue One on the beach. And if we post it, say OK. And what is going on here? So the problem with this is that what it's trying to do is doing a get on our repost. And if we go back to our routes, you'll remember that we did a post. So what we need to do is update our link to do method post, just like this method delete up here. Okay, so we have this one image here that is broken, but let's go ahead and grab this Force Awakens poster, repost it, and you'll see now that we have a new image here. If I click on BB-8, we have this new one here. It's been reposted and it's owned by me, so I can edit it, I can delete it. Unfortunately, the image did not come across, and that's because of how Paperclip works. So to fix this, what we're going to do is go back to our model, and here you'll see that we know we have an image in self, and we have a user ID, and we have an original pin ID. The description's coming acrost without us being able to set it, so that's there. But what we need to do is take a look at repostpin.image. Yours is going to be whatever that is for you. So in my case, has attached file pin image and so forth. So what I'm going to do is repostpin.pinimage, so this is our has attached file, equals self.pinimage. And this will allow us to clone the image across so that in case that pin gets deleted, we don't suddenly lose our attachment. So we don't need to do anything to the server there. This one we can go ahead and delete because it's broken, but now we can repost this poster. And you'll see it down there, owned by BB-8. So there's that image. So that's essentially how you do reposting. What we can do now is add a couple of helper methods. So we've just mentioned these here. But what we want to do is create something to check to see if the pin was a repost. And what we can do for that is create a div is reposts method, and inside of here we'll go ahead and check to see if it's been reposted. We know that it's been reposted if it has an original pin ID. If it has an original pin ID, that means that it was copied from another pin. And so what we can do is we can do a true or false here and allow us to return true or false if the pin ID is there or if it's empty. So what we can do now is call self, which is the pin that it's being called on, right? So if you have @pin.isRepost, this is the pin that it's going to check. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that so we don't mess up our code. And what we want to do is original pin ID dot present question mark. So what this will do is say, is that attribute present, yes or no, and return with true or false, which is really great. So now we can use that in our interface to display maybe a different image or display some kind of word or something to indicate that an image has been repinned from somewhere else. And if that's the case, you can also link to the original pin using the original pin ID. So now let's go ahead and actually go get the full on post. So what this will allow us to do is, instead of saying @pin dot original pin ID, we can actually go and get the original pin. So this method is going to return that pin. Let's change this to original pin. What we're going to do is find, and we can do self.original pin ID. And what that'll do is the same as pin.find for. Whatever that ID is, it will find it. And it will then return it. So if this is a certain pin, it will return it to you, and you have that entire pin accessible to you. But we only want to do this if it's a repost. So we can actually use this up here, and if you can do self.isRepost here. And one of the interesting things about this is that this will only fire a pin back to you if there's an original pin, otherwise it'll be nil. And we can also get rid of self here, so we don't actually need self when we're working inside of Ruby there. It's a little bit cleaner. I'm doing it up here just to make sure it's obvious where these things are coming from, but this cleans this up a little bit, and we can turn this off here, and you can actually go ahead and test each of these things. So you can find out what the original pin is. So in our case of just having created a brand new pin, let's go ahead and say pin.last. So that very last pin that we created was a repin from, let's see, original pin ID 27. So we should now be able to do @pin.isRepost, and we get true. @pin.originalPin, and that pulls back a full pin. So we can say @pin.originalPin.user.username, and that gives us back Jabba the Hutt. So that's a really interesting way of building up helper methods, as well as something like this repost is super useful here for something that is important to this specific model. And instead of taking all this code and littering it into our controller, we can keep it contained into our model, where in this case reposting is pretty similar to a database operation. So we want to keep it in the model and have it describe everything that this pin is and can do. So again, we're going to be doing the ability to like pins and organize them into boards in the next couple videos. We can come in here and let's repost the Rogue One poster. Let's repost the Han Solo there. And now you'll see that these 3 images are mine. If I go to BB8, there is my 3 images as well. So it's working pretty well. If we log out, we can still repost. So that's an issue there. So what we want to do, if we try to repost, it's going to make us log in. So let's just fix that real quick. Let's see. If that user is this current user, let's go ahead and do an end there, and let's just start a new if. So we're going to do if logged in user, and let's say pin user is not equal to current user. So that's going to give us the fact that you're logged in and you can't be the current user to see that post. So that does not like that. And that's because this is user signed in question mark. If user signed in and pin not equal to user, then let's go ahead and refresh that there. Okay, so now I'm not logged in, so I can't repost anything, and that is going to fix that for us. Thanks.